Sam Bowman, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. I was pleased to see your request come in, and I'm so curious what you're going to do with this project and, all the other people's stories that you're going to collect. So
You and I went to high school a long time ago in Honolulu, Hawaii. We went to Punahou School. We both graduated in 1988. I don't think I've had much of a conversation with you since the 1980s.
probably not.
I mean, sorry about that. I assume we've both been busy.
I don't think our paths had the opportunity to cross, but I'm glad that technology brought us together.
So tell me just briefly, where are you right now? What are you doing?
I live in a little suburb southeast of Portland, Oregon, and my wife and I run a little graphic design agency, and we've been living here for since 2001 in this current neighborhood, and since 1994 in Portland. So I've been here for a long time. Been here longer than I lived in Hawaii, certainly. So this is kind of my adult home, and I kind of think of Hawaii and Kailua in particular as my childhood home, and there's a kind of a dividing line there. And my mom still lives in Kailua in the house that I grew up in. That my dad and his sister grew up in, that my grandparents bought new in 1940. Yeah, my dad comes from a large extended Hawaiian family. So his paternal grandmother was a full Hawaiian lady, and this is the turn of the 19th century. An Englishman from Bucyrus, Ohio, came to the islands. I think he was he worked for I think he was like a inspector of health or something like that. Like he had a government position, and he ended up marrying. Her name was Mary Pa, and they had, I think, 6 or 7 kids. And then she died, and he married another woman who and they had another 6 kids. And then I think there was a third wife, and there was another offspring. So there were like 13 kids of that first, sort of what we call the first generation, that then had their own kids. And so there's just dozens of cousins all over the islands, and my dad was one of those many Bowmans that are running around the world today. Hawaiian issues and Hawaiian culture are pretty important in our family, and it's a complicated story, but it's a pretty important one to us. My father attended Kamehameha, and his sister attended Kamehameha. My sister attended Kamehameha. The vast majority of us Bowmans, this is like extended cousins. There were a lot of Bowmans that went to Kamehameha, and then there were a few of us that went to Punahou. I had Bowman cousins that went to Kamehameha, and they would just call me Punahou. I mean, regardless of what it was like, hey, Punahou, you hungry? Or it was like, oh, wow, Punahou, you think you taught that on, huh? That kind of thing. They would just call me Punahou. So, there was that kind of dynamic too. And it's complicated, with that whole thing, Punahou being the missionary school and Kamehameha being what it is. And, but yeah, I think the Hawaiian culture and, Hawaiian issues kind of, they run consistently through our family. Let's put it that way.
So where was your mom from? What was her story? How did she meet your dad?
Yeah, so my mom is from northern Minnesota, Duluth, Minnesota, and it's on Lake Superior, and it's cold country. I mean, it's beautiful there, but it is extreme. It's hot in the summer, and then just frigid cold in the winter. Her maiden name was Holmberg, and she comes from hardy Norwegian stock. Her grandparents and parents were, directly from the old country in Norway, and they settled on probably the coldest spot in the United States because it reminded them of home, I guess. My parents ended up meeting at the University of Minnesota in journalism school. They noticed each other because they both had bare feet during summer classes, and this is early 60s. And I think for my mom, it was kind of a hippie thing. And then for my dad, of course, he was just, as an Islander, he's not going to wear shoes if he didn't have to. And that was sort of the spark that sparked their first conversations. So that's where they met.
So in other words, why are you not wearing shoes? I'll tell you why I'm not wearing shoes.
Yeah, that was the tie that bound them together initially, anyway. So this is like 1964. They married in college and had my sister, my older sister, and they found themselves being young college students with a small child and hardly any money, and so they had to stop school for a while, and they ended up going back to Hawaii for a short stint, and sort of seeking support from my dad's parents, and they ended up living in the caretaker's cottage of the family church, which is St. Christopher's Church in Kailua. It's an Episcopal church. And I think for my mom, she just fell in love with the place and the people immediately. I mean, I think it was such a welcome change, not only, in terms of climate, but, my dad's parents were very welcoming to her. I think she just loved everything about it. At the time when they met, they were an interracial couple. My dad was a big brown Hawaiian looking guy, and I don't know if it would have been illegal in Minnesota, but I know for a fact that, like, at the time, several other states, their marriage would not have been accepted, maybe not even legal. It's just it's weird to think about that now. Her family was very welcoming to my dad. I think he was different. I think they were initially a little cautious, but once they had their first conversation, I think that all went away.
Where were you born, and what was the circumstances of your family when you were born?
Yeah, I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota, I believe as my parents were just graduating college. So they were a young couple now with 2 kids, just graduating. And I think by the time they were finished with school, and they had 2 kids, and they were kind of contemplating their next steps. My dad very briefly was a reporter for UPI, United Press International, and he was sort of a cub reporter, and that's at that point. And they made the decision that they were going to move to Hawaii permanently, and so they packed up this little Volkswagen Bug with 2 little kids and all their worldly possessions, and they drove to San Francisco in the middle of the winter. And I think that is a sign of their desperation for something warmer and more welcoming. And they ended up moving to Hawaii. Large extended family. I can remember going to the Big Island for these giant family luaus, and they would have these wild. There's one incident where I remember that they had an organized shark hunt. And my Big Island relatives, they would string up, they butchered a cow, and they strung it up on stainless steel cables with all these hooks in it, and they threw it over the cliff. I mean, mind you, none of this could happen today, but this is 1974, 75, something, so anything goes. And I remember this vaguely, but they threw this cow over the cliff, and then, there were boats in the water, and then, there's all this blood in the water, and they eventually hooked this shark and hauled this shark up on these cables, and that was part of the luau. And it was, I mean, just at the time, I just thought, oh, this is what people do. And it wasn't until many years later that how much I realized how unique that was.
And would you guys eat the shark?
It must have gone into some. I mean, this was like a full-on luau. So there was there was an emu, and there was all manner of Hawaiian foods. So I mean, I don't remember, a dish of shark, but it must have gone into something. I just was too young to be asking questions. So
Was there music at these gatherings where people?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there was just all kinds of music, and it was just auntie after auntie where they would get up and do the hula. And I mean, it was just like, and it wasn't planned. It was just, it just sort of happened. It was like, it was all very well understood that this is what you do. Like, oh, this is your song, and I mean, it was pretty wonderful. I didn't realize how special that was for a long time. I just thought, oh, all families do this, right? But there were probably, I don't know, 100 family members. That's a big occasion.
And your mom was from the mainland, so you had that orientation as well. But I mean, did you look around and say, I'm Hawaiian? Or like how did you view yourself?
At the time, I didn't really think about it. As a little kid, I didn't even think twice about it. It was just normal. I know I look different, I think to anybody looking at me, you wouldn't know that I had any Hawaiian blood. But to my relatives, it didn't matter. I mean, they just, as long as you're not a complete asshole, I think they're pretty welcoming. And it wasn't until high school when I kind of started to think like, oh, there's some stuff simmering around, and it was usually like in places like the Sandy Beach parking lot, that kind of thing. And I never like went looking for trouble or anything like that, but like sometimes trouble would come and find you, and there's just guys out there that just want to fight and stuff like that, and they don't care who you are, so
you were called a fucking Howley, right?
Absolutely. And it was weird because it's not like there's the opportunity. No, you don't understand. Like, my family's part Hawaiian. Like, there's no conversation that happens like that, so
let's talk about Punahou. How did you break away from family tradition and go to Punahou? When was that? How old were you, and what were your first impressions?
Well, my dad worked at the newspaper. My mom eventually, through a series of kind of career steps, ended up as the director of publications at Punahou. She would publish the Punahou Bulletin 4 times a year, and she, put together the annual calendar, a number of other things, and so she was really busy. And as a perk of her employment, one child could go to Punahou without cost. I don't think I would have been able to go to Punahou otherwise. And I started in the 2nd grade and ended up graduating.
You were at the old Winnie units, which have been now torn down. Do you have memories of playing in the Winnie units? Talk about those days.
Oh yeah, I mean, overall my memories of Punahou are very, very positive, especially in the younger years. I remember, the banyan tree in the Winnie units just being a magical place. And there's a swing set kind of high on the hill. You could really get your swing going and just launch off sort of where you would normally land to the downside of the hill. And it was just, I mean, I hope they've removed it, because I mean, we risked serious loss of life and limb, and just, we would just get wrecked on the downside of this hill and then go right back and do it again and again and again. And it was great fun.
I love talking about the 70s because, to your point, so much random, unsupervised, unregulated bad stuff happened, and people seemed to have a pretty good time until they died unexpectedly. So can you think of any other kind of loosey-goosey moments of your childhood, whether at Punahou or somewhere else, that just screams the 70s? Because frankly, we need to tell those stories before they're lost to history.
Well, with 2 working parents, it's just this is not unusual to us, but my sister and I, we were latchkey kids, and after school let out and we found our way home, on our way on the city bus or what have you. There were just hours of unsupervised time. There were half a dozen of us neighborhood kids on our little dead end street, and we would do things like on our BMX bikes where the task of the day was like, all right, now you lay down on the on the off side of the ramp, and I'll jump over you this time. And as one of the younger members of the crew, I found myself getting run over often and kind of just fell for it over and over again.
Right. If kids tried to leap over each other on bikes today, some parent would probably call the police.
Oh, absolutely. And this was in the day when there were like vacant lots in Kailua, which I don't think those exist anymore. But it was just mayhem. It was all just this. It was like Lord of the Flies. There's just a pack of 6 boys, and just completely unsupervised.
So let's talk about Punahou again and sort of how you fit in socially. I would imagine that in the 1970s, and you already kind of alluded to this, reporters at the Honolulu Star-Bulletin weren't making a ton of money. So Punahou has all kinds of people, but including some very wealthy families, obviously.
Sure.
Did you feel that? Did you see yourself as being a guy with less money than others?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's the disparity, that gap definitely felt. And I don't think I ever felt resentful, but like I felt like, oh, we're dealing with different things here. And there's the superficial things that you can see, but then there's other things that there's more life experience things like, oh, we're going to Vail for Christmas, and we're going to ski for Christmas. Like, I was like, wow, that's not even mentioned. Like, that's not even an option. Like, I didn't even know that was a thing. So there was, I remember
go hang out in a vacant lot for Christmas, right?
That's right. We're going to go run each other over with BMX bikes. I kind of knew it. I mean, especially in high school, you're going to other people's houses, and you're just, I'm looking around going like, wow, there's a profound difference here. And at the time, maybe it was like, oh shit, I got to worry about this now. But, in hindsight, it's like, get over it. That's just the way it is. There's the haves and the have-nots. And as it turns out, we actually weren't so bad. There's plenty of other people that were way worse off than we were. So
what kind of a persona do you think you had for yourself in high school? How do you think other people viewed you? Did you feel like you were the kind of person you wanted to be? Did you feel like there's something people were missing? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, and I don't know if I can answer that coherently. In high school, my dad died in 1986, and he died of cancer, and he was initially diagnosed in 1981. So we were 11 years old, and so for that 5 years, it was an on again, off again kind of a thing. And it's difficult for me to separate what would be sort of normal teenage identity issues with his illness, and ultimately when he died. It's hard for me to separate those things. So it's all kind of bundled together into this mass of confusion. They're definitely related. I have no idea how people viewed me. I know in hindsight, when I think about some of how I behaved at certain periods of time, I'm desperately regretful about like some of the dumb things I said, and some things that I did that were just insensitive. And I kind of think of myself as kind of being a pinball, just getting kind of knocked around in the machine, for better and for worse.
I do remember that you seemed to be very determined, because one day I saw you up on the track by yourself, running laps around the track with garbage bags stuffed into your body so that you would sweat profusely and presumably lose weight. What were you doing?
Yeah, that was a regular thing. We were trying to make, I'm sure I was trying to make weight for a tournament. And that's part of wrestling. Yeah, it's a masochistic sport. It's like, it's brutal. It's like, I think the guys that are really good at wrestling, they're this wicked combination of intellect and strength and flexibility and stamina and just fortitude and determination. And it didn't take very long before I was like, I may not be wired to go the distance with this sport. I think also, what I was really needing was what football had to offer, which was kind of a more of a team dynamic. Like for my daughter, what I told her, she's the only child, and what I told her is like, I don't care what you play, but just play a team sport and just be part of something that you participate in a group.
Was there sort of like any moment or any class where you kind of had an intellectual awakening, where you kind of thought like, wow, this might be something I want to really dive into a lot deeper?
I really appreciated sort of the, I guess, the high stakes mechanical nature of glass blowing and the procedure. There's a lot going on there. And I later ended up doing some work for Hugh Jenkins at his house, and I kind of saw how he lived as an artist and as a professional. And that kind of opened my eye to what it means to be a maker. And I kind of think of myself as a maker now, as a teenage boy. And, I think one who wasn't especially oriented toward classroom learning. I wouldn't come to find this out about myself for much later, but like, I'm a hands-on learner. I learned by seeing, by example, by doing, and by repetition. And sometimes that classroom learning just didn't fit. I mean, it was just, whew. And so my mom kind of had to take some evasive action at times to get my head out of my ass.
Which is hard to do for teenage boys.
Absolutely. And like I mentioned earlier, my dad died in the fall of our junior year. And I had already, been sort of spinning a little bit out of control before then, for a variety of reasons. But my mom had her hands full throughout my high school career. And so, by the time my dad died, I think I was spinning pretty wildly out of control.
In what way? Academically, or were there other areas of your life that were not solid?
I think in every way. Academically, I really started to take a dive. And I think, like my behavior was really, even outside of the normal teenage, buffoonery, I just made stupid errors. It's kind of some self-destructive behavior. It really, like, it took me almost 10 years, I would say, before I started to, deconstruct that and put it back together in a way that where I was like, okay, you can move forward now. It was all about denial. I didn't want to deal with any of that stuff. Like, I don't think there were very many people that even knew that my dad was sick. And when he died, a lot of people knew, but I didn't want to make an issue of it. I didn't want to talk about it. All I wanted was to go the other way. I just wanted, I wanted the good times to be there, not anything difficult.
It sounds like from the age of 11 to 16.
Yeah.
Your dad was sick the whole time, and the prognosis was not good, right?
Yeah, with cancer, there were periods of remission, and he was not bedridden until probably the last few months of his life. I don't remember specifically the timing, but it's there. It's just so, and he wrote about it. He wrote extensively about it. So we knew what was going on. He was articulate about it, and he was not shy about sharing what was happening. So it wasn't a secret in our house. And as a kid, you just want to be a kid, and that's all I wanted, but it wasn't going to happen. I don't think I had the tools to deal with it, honestly.
Well, I remember when your dad passed away, it was known throughout the state. He was a well-known person. I remember we talked about it in my home because he wrote about it. And, so not only were you dealing with this private, tragedy, but the whole school and in the whole state knew, at least at the end, right?
Yeah. And there was something in me that, like, I guess, I'm kind of an introvert. at the core. And I think at that period of, what was I, 16, like I got resentful, like that people were even at the house, you know, I just wanted it to be quiet. And they were, you know, in Hawaii, it's like everyone's coming over, you know, they're bringing food and they're going to hang out. And, you know, I just remember having a really hard time just being forced to reckon with all that and, you know, try and answer people's questions. And you don't have it. I didn't have any answers, you know, it's like, I mean, it was nasty. I mean, towards the end, you know, he was really like kind of grasping at straws for anything. And, you know, there were these kind of crazy, you know, bean and carrot based diets. And there was one guy that had convinced him that he should pull out all his teeth that had fillings. And so, you know, not only are you dealing with all of the fallout from chemotherapy and radiation, but then, you know, you go and have all your teeth pulled out. I mean, it was awful. Cancer is just 100% no good. He was a feature writer and also an entertainment critic. So he was, as kids, he would take us along to, you know, all the local theater productions at the Diamond Head Theater, you know, at Fort Shafter, you know, their theater. You know, it kind of like seeded, for me, it seeded a very, very intense hatred of musicals, specifically like Andrew Lloyd Webber musicals. I've come around like with the more contemporary ones, like, but like you can't get.
You need to let it go, Sam.
Yeah, well, actually, I've become a huge Frozen fan. But like, you can't. I'm not going to go to Cats. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to do it.
Did your dad, as entertainment reporter, ever write a bad review that got him in trouble?
He wrote a review of a professional wrestling event at, I think it was at the Blaisdell Center. And this is like, I don't know, late 70s, maybe early 80s. And he wrote the review as if it were like a musical or, you know, some kind of a stage play where, you know, the lights go up and the men in costumes come out and, you know, it's all choreographed. And he would describe.
That's exactly what it is.
Exactly. I mean, it was so spot on. Now we talk about that openly, where he's like, and then, you know, such and such a character, you know, picks up a chair and, you know, hits it over, you know, his shoulder. But really, you can tell, you can see that the brunt of the force is delivered to the floor and not his shoulder. I mean, he's just like deconstructing the whole event to the point where, like, you know, the next day, a couple of those wrestlers came in to the newspaper and confronted him about, like, how could you write this review? This is legitimate. You just don't understand what you're watching and all this kind of stuff. And he, you know, he pulled no punches. You know?
So we're almost done. I'll just ask a couple more questions and I'll let you go, Sam. Really appreciate it. So, you know, when was graduation? It was what, May 88?
Yeah, I believe so.
I
Yeah.
can't remember. What was your frame of mind then? It was more than a year, right, after your dad had passed away. You were going.
Yeah.
What was your frame of mind?
Adrift. I'll be honest. Like, that was it continued to be a difficult time. You know, at Punahou, they were very, very clear. And my parents were with this 100%. A, you need to go to college, and B, you need to leave the islands. And I remember hearing that loud and clear. And at graduation, I remember not having a North Star to look to. You know, I just had no idea where I should go, what I should be studying. And there was this sort of very nebulous thing of like, oh, just you're going to go and explore, and, you know, you're going to find out what you're interested in. And so I did. You know, I went to Oregon State, and after a couple of terms, I really felt like this is not working. Like, I'm going to classes and I'm you know, doing fine in the classes, but I don't see the purpose. You know, and so there was. You know, I ended up quitting school and moving back in with my mom. And to her credit, you know, here I am, 18 years old. Maybe I was 19 at the time. she said, all right, if you're going to live here, here's the rent, here's what it's going to be. I don't remember what it was, $400 a month or something like that. And I remember being like really, furious about that. I'm like, rent? What do you mean rent? And she's like, hey, you're an adult now. If you're not going to go to school, then you're going to pay rent, whether it's here or somewhere else. So, man up, basically. And, I ended up working in Waikiki as a busboy and, extracting some lessons from that experience, which is really valuable. And I ended up going back to school and like defining, identifying a direction that would fit for me and stuff like that. So it was definitely like a fall down and get up kind of a situation.
So you went through, from age 11 to 16, kind of the excruciating experience of, watching your father decline. And then there's 10 years after that where, as a result, you maybe were drifting a bit. From all those hard experiences, do you feel like there's sort of a superpower that you have, or you've got some personality traits that are like, give you an advantage because of those experiences?
Ooh, man. I don't know about superpower. Maybe I was just exposed to some things that we all have to confront at some point. We're pretty fragile creatures, and we're going to have loved ones that die, and we're going to die. And I think I had to juggle a lot of those thoughts early, and that made it more difficult. But we're all headed in the same direction. We're all on the same train. Just some of us get to the station sooner than others. Get busy living or get busy dying, to quote Shawshank Redemption. So I think at some point, like I kind of opened up to that. It's like, okay, you just need to persevere. Just keep moving forward.
For the record, are you busy living right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm super happy. Like I have a great family, and carved out a nice little life for myself. And my quaint little neighborhood with lending libraries on several corners, and we've got a neighbor down the road who has goats and chickens in his front yard. It's like a petting zoo just a couple of blocks away. So I really like my life.